Oh, you supposed to.
Ta-da.
Three of us to do it today.
That's all right. It usually takes us more. It takes 4.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
Our regulars aren't here. They're out traveling on pilgrimage. How dare they leave us technologically bereft? So, prayers. I've hidden the prayer book. There it is.
Okay.
So the 7-limb prayer is sort of a go-to for covering all the bases. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clowns of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. And the refuge and bodhicitta prayer. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Hey, Bob. Hi, Gina. So, all right. So we've been talking about how to bring the teachings to our daily life. You know, what, like we all do fun when we're reading the Dharma. We're reflecting on the Dharma, on the teachings, but then we get up and go out into the world and we forget how to act. So we've been trying to figure out how to make that better. So what are some of the things we can do?
Pausing.
Pause. And what do we do during that pause?
Set an intention.
Actually, we remember the intention we set earlier.
Okay, remember.
So one of the things that's helpful is that when you wake up in the morning or before you go out to start your day, that you set an intention about how you want to be that day for your body, speech, and mind. So if there are habits you're trying to change, you're really trying to speak more kindly, perhaps, be less impatient, then you set an intention to work hard on that today. And then in a moment when you think, I can feel impatience growing, you pause and you remember that you're trying to work on that, so that can help you maybe not say anything that indicates your impatience, or maybe even help you relax and not be impatient. Just depends on how soon you catch it. So, but that's the only way to really get started, is we have to notice what we're doing in our mind. And then we have to notice, we have to remember what it is we're trying to do. We have to put those pieces together. Pausing really helps. We don't have to rush to respond to anything that's said to us. We can pause a moment and try to hear it without judgment, of self or other, just to hear, what are these words saying, Because sometimes we're reacting to something that's not there. We may think criticism's there, but if we step back a moment, we'll realize it's not really about me. It's, whatever, it's easier to choose how to respond rather than just react, because we tend to be very reactive, and being reactive is not going to get us where we want to go, because that just brings up our habits. When we just react, it's like a reflex. And so what happens with a reflex? Whatever we're habituated to. The body has reflexes. Well, so does our mind. So does our speech. So we want to be able to get a little ahead of that and be able to choose how we respond. And it all starts with reflecting on how do we want to be? What's interfering in our lives, in our relationships, in our general contentment through the day, or when we realize we're agitated, like a lot of people get agitated when driving to work or driving home from work, and trying to figure out a way that you can relax that so that it, that's not what, determines how you respond to the day. Or you oversleep and then you have to kickstart yourself. Oh. So it's always good to pause and say, it's okay, I'll get there. I'll get there when I get there, or we drive like a maniac. So we want to think about whether or not it's worth that, as opposed to accepting like, okay, I'm late, and driving like a maniac might make me dead, so maybe I'll just relax and accept the fact that I'm late and get there with a positive frame of mind and safely, and everybody on the road will appreciate it. So that kind of thing. What else can we do? What does all this involve? It involves a lot of steps, actually.
You say some prayers.
That can help if you have prayers that mean something to you. I don't know where any of y'all are starting from, so it's, those of us who are kind of committed to this path have prayers we say, to help inspire us in the morning, help remind us, sort of like the refuge prayer, oh yeah, that's right. I'm doing things to try to become enlightened for the benefit of others. So if I'm going to try to benefit others, it would help if I was kind, patient, generous, as opposed to, selfish, careless, indifferent, that kind of thing. So, but you have to, it's really about, we have to look, where am I, how am I thinking, speaking, and doing? And are there areas where I'd like to change it? I'm not comfortable with my habits. So we have to look. And we have to get familiar with what we do now. And then we have to choose whether or not we think what we're doing is actually working for us, or perhaps an obstacle to our own contentment. So we have to be very self-aware. So that's why doing something like in the morning, taking 5 minutes to try to calm the mind, set an intention for your day, can help. It's why we want to get familiar with just looking, what's going on? What's going on in my head? Am I already upset? Because sometimes we wake up in a bad mood.
Yeah, I guess because we always in a rush to do something.
Yep. And so that's why I ask, do you waste any time?
What is it?
Do you waste any time?
Do I what?
Waste
any
any
time.
time?
Waste.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So you
do.
have time to
I
take.
wake up, I make my coffee, and I just try to change very quickly, get in the car very quickly, have my coffee, drive. So many lunatics out there. I may be one of them. I don't
Yeah,
know.
you may
I'm not gonna
be.
defend myself.
That might be a clue. But the point is, most of us waste some time too.
Yeah,
It's not like we use all our time well.
we don't. Yeah.
So if we think we don't have time to take a few minutes and try to calm our minds, and, set a container for our day, we're mistaken. We just have to make that time. That may mean we wake up 5 minutes earlier.
True.
If we always wake up late, then we're setting ourselves up to have to rush
Yes.
through the day because we may have commitments to other people, like at our job.
Yeah.
So it's recognizing if we are getting in our own way, either through our actions or our speech, or the way we think. Because our actions of speech and body are sort of driven by the way we think. And we're so habituated to certain actions that we don't even think we're thinking about it because it's so fast. It's just what we do. So it's like when you decide, okay, I'm going to drink a little less coffee this year. And then you have to, like make yourself remember to not just grab it. And it's hard because you're trying to break a habit you're very familiar with. And that's hard. It takes a little extra energy. And this again is why we pause, is so that it gives us a little space to interrupt that forward energy of following the habit.
But I guess the thing is, in the morning, when we wake up, we keep it for 5 more minutes, 5 more minutes.
And what are you gaining from that? Nothing, except having to
Nothing,
drive like a
nothing.
maniac to get
Yes.
to work.
You don't even sleep really because you're so worried about those 5 minutes.
Yeah. And so you really want to look at exactly those kinds of things. Why am I doing this to myself?
Yeah.
It agitates me from the very beginning. It's not necessary. I'm choosing to make myself crazy. So it's also about taking responsibility for our part in the chaos of our lives, that we are thinking about things in a way that may not be necessary. Like it may not be true that extra 5 minutes, 10 minutes of so-called sleep benefits you in some way. What other things get in the way of actually living your life according to, what you value?
You may have family that needs you, so you say, "Oh, I'm going to meditate," and then your family needs you, and then you can't do it when you want.
So what does that actually do?
Distraction.
And mainly it says I can't do that now. Doesn't mean you can't ever do it. It means because you really can't schedule people, can you? People have, sometimes we can. Sometimes we could say, I just need 5 minutes, and then I'll be there, and you can have that. Sometimes you can't have that. But so it just means you have to make a date for another time. But often we don't do that. We just act like, oh, well, can't do it today, and that may not be true. We want to look at what really we value, and make sure we make some time for that. So the Buddha just said that, taking care of your mind is one of the most important things we can do. And one of the ways to take care of it is to sit quietly for a while and find out what's going on. Trying to calm the mind down, and just being quiet and still can help with that.
But that is like hard sometimes because even before you leave the house, you already think what could happen before it even happens.
Yeah, but that's a choice. And that's a
choice.
habit.
I never think of that. Yeah, that's a choice.
That's a choice. Because when we we can't know what's going to happen in the future.
True.
Thinking about it isn't going to make whatever. I mean, it is nothing but a story we're telling ourselves about what could happen.
Yes.
It's not a fact.
We have no control of what's going to happen.
That's right. So we don't have to sit there and think about it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a choice. And it may not be an effective choice. We have to plan, that's not but that's just kind of problem solving our schedule. But when we just think about what's going to happen, we tend to go into either a negative or, we're daydreaming about something really positive or we're worrying about something really negative instead of just finding out and just living our day and discovering what's going to happen, not trying to guess in advance. So these are ways that we want to examine. This is why we have to get really familiar with how we think now, just to observe it. Oh, look at me. I'm planning ahead, even though I don't have a clue what will actually happen. And I certainly can't control what's going to happen, So I might as well just let that go and live my life and see what happens. Because for every moment that we're spending in the past or the future, we're missing our life because that only happens now. So it's really useful to spend more time in experiencing what's happening and taking charge of that experience, and going, okay, I'm about to shift to great impatience now. And maybe that will not make my day. So maybe I want to pause and settle my mind down, and just have a different way to respond to whatever's going on. So when people pull us, it's like then might have to make that pause and go, well, I want to be here for my family. This is a way I can benefit others. So yay. And have, be able to embrace that moment, and really be there for that person. Because as long as all you're thinking about is how you'd rather be doing something else, or that you were planning on doing something else, you're not there for the person. And they might notice that. They may not be able to put words to that, but they may not feel heard or helped or whatever is needed, And if what we really want to do is have, get along and be helpful and be harmonious, we need to be able to be attentive and not be caught up in what we're missing out on. But then but I value taking care of my mind. And so we want to find some time again, so we don't miss out for taking care of ourselves, because we need self-care as well. Some days we're not going to have it. But you can still take care of yourself in your mind, while you go about doing the busyness of the day. And one of the ways to do that is to concentrate on whatever it is you're doing as it's happening. Then you're not exhausting yourself by doing what you're doing and thinking about a million other things. It can be more restful, to have more energy to do what you need to do. Yep.
I think one of the most difficult thing is that if you're working and you're trying to catch up with everybody else in the workplace, and it's totally against what everybody else is doing. We really are trying to multitask.
I'm sorry.
We're trying to multitask a lot of times.
Which doesn't work, does it? Research doesn't show that it works at all. It's like a total failure.
Right.
So we think we're multitasking when actually we're just not getting anything done.
Or a lot of times you're thinking about your day at work because you're planning how you want it to go.
Yeah, guess what? You're not in charge of that.
Oh, that's a great one. Next time my boss tells me something, I'm going to tell him, none of us are in charge of it. So what's the use of thinking?
Well, you're not in charge of it, is it? He is. She is. The boss gets to decide.
Well, I'm in charge of what I'm supposed to do.
Up to a point.
Right.
If you work for anybody else, there's a point at which you're not the decision maker. They can come in and say, I'm sorry, I know that you, blah, 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 but we're going to have to go do this, And then we have to be able to be flexible enough in our minds to be able to happily do whatever. do, partly because so we feel okay about our day. So yes, we plan, and yes, we have to figure out a way to stay harmonious with our co-workers and get our work done, which means guarding our time as well. So that, we figure out good ways to be able to interrupt somebody's conversation that's not helping us get our job done, and it's not really a necessary conversation without them feeling like, you're dismissive. And that's a challenge. But there are ways that you can let people know that you'd love to have some time to talk to them about this, but right now you don't. Then you have to check them out later at some other time when you do have a little time, so that they know you mean it when you say you'll talk to them later. So a lot of it is about trying to take responsibility for the fact that it's okay that you're busy, and it's okay to say, I'm sorry, I'm really busy. I'm really slammed right now, but I'd like to, I'd love to talk to you later, but I can't do it right now.
And we try to be superhuman, super good at everything.
And have everybody like you as well.
Yeah, true.
So but it really is about taking responsibility for what we want to do. Like, okay, it's not my job to have a conversation about someone else's plans for the weekend, and I'm really slammed for time. We don't have to judge the other person about the fact that that's what they want to talk about at this moment, but we know that we have to do this. So we just need to be graceful about finding ways to be able to get back to what we're doing. And none of these things are, piece of cake. It takes thoughtfulness, and then it takes following through. And it can be difficult.
Yeah. Today, I called Sharon, and she was right in the middle of something very important, and she was so graceful how she handled it. I really appreciated that. Yes, Sharon, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Even you could do that.
yes.
That's very sweet.
Yeah, well, no, I'm not being sweet, it's the truth.
Yeah.
Well, and and we have to be able to hear it. When somebody says, I'm sorry, I'm busy, we have to not feel like they're telling us they don't want to talk to us. Because, we bring our own stuff into everything, just like they do. Everybody we're interacting with has their own stuff, And so we have to be sensitive to the fact that, maybe sometimes when we overreact to something and somebody's telling us that that's an obstacle we're creating. It's not coming from the other person. So it's really quite, it's just taking responsibility for our time, for our speech, for our actions, and choosing to try to do things in a kind, meaningful way, with getting our work done. I mean, we have to also get our work done. So it is not selfish to take time for your work. That is an obligation you have to the company you work for. And that company may be yours, but it's still, that's part of the responsibility of work. At the same time, they're real people that we work with who have their lives and their messes and all their stuff, so we don't want to ever lose sight of the fact that it's people we're working with, and we're usually working for people in some sense. It may be several steps removed, but almost all work, the reason it exists is because other people want that work done. whether it's for clothes, whether it's for food, whether it's for the theater, whatever. So, and it's the way we can cooperate as a community, is that people, participate in some way through their jobs, through their families, whatever. But the way in which we go about that has a tremendous effect on how we feel at the end of our day. So if we feel like we didn't get a chance to do our job, we might regret that. If we feel like we were rude to people, we might regret that. So we want to be able to acknowledge when we do things that actually don't make us happy. At the moment they seem like the right thing to do. Maybe upon reflection, you're not so sure. And then you want to kind of look, is that a habit? Do I do that a lot? And if you do it a lot and you're not really happy with the outcome, maybe you want to change that. And then you have to really explore, well, how can I do that? How do I need to reframe my experience so I can start to see a way to respond differently? So according to the Buddhist teachings, living an ethical life is important to happiness, being patient, being generous, developing our wisdom, developing our concentration, which is what we need in order to develop our wisdom. Because if we're highly distracted, we're not able to develop our wisdom. Like say you've got an issue and you want to try to figure out how to change it, you need to maybe get help. So you might look towards teachings, you might seek help, but you have to be able to listen, think about, whatever's been said, compare it to your experience. You need to check up. All of that requires a little bit of paying attention. So if you're highly distracted, you're not, it's just always going to be scattering your mind. And it's very hard to change things with a scattered mind. So that's why this habit of pausing, really allowing yourself to think what's happening right now, and then choosing how to respond, that requires a little concentration. So learning how to calm the mind, still the mind, helps with that. Because one of the things we want to learn how to do is to recognize that we're not constantly under threat. We don't have to make decisions right away. We don't have to think that the world's attacking us in every moment. We don't have to push, 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 push. That rushing around all the time and pushing, pushing, pushing is agitating. It's hard to have a calm mind if that's how you operate, if you're constantly just rushing. It's hard to do things well.
Yeah, it's funny. Everything else you're talking about is making me think that, well, what came to mind is I'm a little anxious coming because I don't like driving really at night. So I think when there were times like when I've been driving and I let people cut in front of me, I let them in or whatever. And, but I was a little agitated, as you're saying,
Yeah.
and thinking about, oh no, it's getting dark and tonight and da da da. And someone wanted to get in, and I was like, nope.
I'm sorry.
And I felt afterwards, I'm glad to say, I guess, I felt kind of guilty, I was like, that wasn't really very nice, but yeah, that's kind of everything that
Yeah.
thinking about.
And so we have to be able to go, I know what that's about. I don't like driving at night. It's getting dark. And so, and so you have to be self-respectful. Okay, this is an issue I have, but letting someone in or not isn't really probably going to change the outcome.
Right.
You know,
Exactly, yeah.
so
That's not what I
sometimes
was
it's good,
thinking, but now I.
it's just, we have to choose. And then other times we might say, yeah, well, I'm not going to let 15 cars in because it's important for me to try to get home as well. It's still light, so we just, we have to know what our limitations are, and also whether our action is, if it's really reflecting the reality of the situation or just what we want. We just quit interrupting me. I want to get home, you know? So, and of course, we all know that being a kind, generous driver actually is probably a safer way to drive, So it's, so you have to weigh all those things. And there's no absolute right way to respond to anything, There's definitely ways that are kind, and there are ways that are not kind. There are ways that are reflect our agitated mind, and there are ways that reflect a peaceful mind. There's ways that reflect our self-centered mind, that it's all about me and y'all should all cooperate and get out of my way, and ways that are, about I'm part of a community, so I need to work and live with others. And, you can't, it's not always about me. So it's not, so we want, we want to get skilled at recognizing what our values are, what kind of person we want to try to be like most of the time, and then see which actions we do, body and speech, that don't fit with that. So that we give ourselves a better condition to do things where we don't feel bad later. So that's, it's, and we get to choose that. And we get to choose which ones we want to work on up to a point. My example always is, like if you're a child abuser, you've got to stop now. You don't get to wait till you decide you're ready. Just keep doing that, So there's some things that aren't negotiable. You need, if you want to have time with your children, that's something you're going to have to stop now, not tomorrow, now, if you have, if you're kind of a rageaholic, oh my dad, a rageaholic, then you want to have harmonious relationships, you got to stop that now. It's, it's got to be first on your list, not, down the road, So we have to be, we have to really acknowledge if we're doing things that are really harmful to ourselves and others, and work on those first. If you're, just the average person tooling around that, you don't have, you're not out of control with your anger or your rage or your greed even, like if you always taking things that aren't yours, that might be something you need to change. But you want to have an honest self-assessment of your behaviors of body, speech, and mind, and then see, oh, I'm really tired of being so judgmental about other people. It's like ridiculous. I don't know anything about them, and yet I still judge them. I see them, I see strangers and feel like I know, whatever, That's not a nice way to be. I'm tired of doing that, And I don't like it when people judge me. So maybe, as they say in karma, like, if you don't want to receive it, maybe you shouldn't dish it out. So it's it's getting familiar, sometimes it's just like, I'm tired of, maybe the group of people you go to lunch with, spends the whole time trashing other people, so you might want to become skilled at diverting that conversation if it's possible, or you just choose other people to go to lunch with, or at least not participate in the conversation. But there's choice in all of this. And what we have to also respect is that our habits have been formed from a very long time. So changing them takes time and effort.
Effort.
Yeah, it definitely takes effort. It's not magic.
Yeah.
You know, and so there are ways in which to help to support yourself in making those changes, like really looking at the benefits of stopping that behavior. You know, and that can be a test of what do you think benefits you about it? You know, like you may realize, oh, but I'm a pushover, you know. I'm not, if I don't stand my ground and not let any cars in, for a stupid example, you know, but we need to look because we have to see that, oh, well, maybe holding to that idea, first of all, it might not be true, you know, kindness is not a weakness. Courtesy is not a weakness. Generosity is not a weakness, you know. So we really want to examine our beliefs about our habits and respect how powerful habits are because they're like reflexes, you know. That's why we call them, you know, they're just there. We haven't even had to think about it, you know, but something has triggered that reflex, you know, so it's can be very powerful. So that's why we need to develop the habit of pausing so that at least we don't do anything or say anything that we'll regret later. And the learning to just hold on, you know, can help us give us that space. We need to do something differently. And even that still takes time, you know. But as you make progress, the reward, it's a big payoff. You know, as we've done it throughout our lives, and whenever we've changed anything, developed a new habit, you know. Like say maybe you're a big procrastinator or something, and you finally get a handle on it, at least at work or something. I remember in college, I was a real procrastinator about writing papers. And when I finally just did them on time and discovered just the joy of having finished on time and not having that constant worry, it was like, oh, there's a big payoff here, you know. So we want, you know, so those kinds of, because we will have that kind of experiences as we make some, you know, little steps in the right direction. If, you know, we'll have this, if we notice, we'll see that we're, you know, oh, and that there's a payoff for it. I feel better about my day. I didn't say any unkind things to people. I wasn't, whatever, you know. Or if you never speak up for yourself and you start, you know, letting your voice be heard, you know, then you know, that may help you with your relationships and getting along with coworkers and all sorts of things. So it's just like, so some of us have to learn to shut up and others of us have to learn to speak up. Just depends on, you know who you are probably. So, but it is a lot about reflecting on what you consider positive habits and cultivating those. And you already have them. It's not like you're starting from a blank slate. So you're just trying to give yourself a little more time to be able to cultivate those more often. You know? Does that make sense?
No, I used to, as soon as I came in the house, turn the TV on,
Right.
distract me. I didn't really want to think. I really didn't want to think about anything that would make me upset, my past, my relationship, the phone call, you know, something like that, right? But I've noticed sometimes I don't put the TV on until 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night or something, you know, like I'll come in, I'll sit down. I ask myself, what's going on with you? Who are you, Sharon? That's what I say. I ask myself, who are you, Sharon?
Good for you.
That's my,
Yeah. It can really, you know, like some people need to do that when they park their car before they get into the house because they bring their day with them. and they have family that they're going to interact with. So it can be really good to pause in your car and go, okay, now I'm entering a different part of my day. What's my intention for this? You know, to really be able to walk into the house with a feeling like, oh, these are the people I care about. I want to be here for them.
Oh.
You know, so you can leave the work day behind and really be there, which enriches your life. So you don't feel like it's all work, you know. It gives your family a fighting chance to have your attention for a few minutes. So, you know, so this is why setting an intention about what you're going to do next can be so helpful. You can have one in the morning when you start your day. Then maybe there's a big meeting at work. You can set an intention before that. Then, so you can use it all sorts of ways. Or you have a nice lunch break, or you have, and you can make an intention for that. A lot of people meditate on their lunch break. So, because that's the only time they have total control over, because their family's not there. So, so you have to figure out what works for you. But but intentions can help you focus in the direction you want to go in, and not just be dragged around by your reflex habits that appear, and so that you can, choose. Like you can choose when you're running late and it might get dark before you go home. You go, okay, I need to relax. It's not going to be pitch black by the time I get home, probably, unless there's some horrible accident on the road, and then you want to be worried about them and not, yourself. So, we can create more spaciousness if we set intentions, and if the intentions come from our heart, our mind, heart, same word in Buddhism, not from somebody else's agenda, what we value. And it makes it the odds are much greater that we'll be able to have that manifest. And it's about what your part of things, not other people's parts of things, because we can't control what other people are doing. But we can take care of ourselves, take care of our minds, our voices, our actions. And that can make us less reactive. Then the end of actions, you can think, you can reflect, well, how'd that go? Okay, I set an intention before the meeting, yay for setting the intention. Didn't do so well on following through on the intention, but hey, at least I remember the beginning. You have to start small, so you pat yourself in the back for any part. And then you can say, oh, and in the middle of the meeting, I remembered. So these things will help you be attracted to remembering your intentions. If you beat yourself up, oh, I forgot all about it, you're going to lose interest really fast. But if instead you're sort of like, oh, it was a good intention, so I like that intention, that will encourage you to keep going with that habit, developing that habit, And that same thing with pauses. If you can just, you go, oh man, I remembered to pause. I still yell at him, but at least I remembered to pause. I chose to yell. And then you take responsibility for that. So, and then at the end of the day, you can reflect about the whole day, and kind of, genuinely regret any things that you said or did that hurt others, or hurt yourself, and you can rejoice about all the steps you made in the direction. Now, some of them aren't steps you made, some of them are the good habits you already have. You want to notice those too. not just, oh, I was a jerk, you want to also go, oh, but I was kind and patient during there. So we don't have a habit of doing that. So we want to notice how we're just a mixture of things. The Buddha said we all have the potential to become enlightened. So we have everything we need already to become an enlightened being. So we're not starting like a blank slate. We have good qualities, so it's, that's hopeful. And if we look, we'll see them. So it just depends on your habits. If you tend to badmouth yourself and others, you want to quit practicing that habit because it's not good for you and it's not good for others. And start building your sense of self-worth. You can become a Buddha. Of course, we have to act right. We have to, speak right, all those things. So we're heading in the right direction if we're working on these things. So, but we already have loving kindness and generosity. I think I have some patience somewhere occasionally.
Yes.
But, I used to have tons of anger. So I've made lots of progress. I'm just not there yet. So we want to remind ourselves, we want to acknowledge, we want to get really familiar with what's going on with us all the time. Not to be self-absorbed, but so we have choices about how we respond. So they really are responses, not reactions. Any questions, arguments, debates?
I like the suggestion of responding and not reacting. That makes me feel like I'm more present and I'm more engaged for myself, for my company.
Yeah, it's really nice, isn't it, to, like I said, actually live your life, as opposed to just, reacting with our habits. Because we've got lots of them. Some of them are great. Like the habit that we have that if you see some child, obviously lost, you immediately go over to see if you can help them. That's a great habit. But being able to really, the more we can tune in to what's going on with ourselves, the more we'll recognize when we're not being mindful of other people in the room. If we're careless about what's going on with us, we may be careless about others. Yes.
I'm curious about your thoughts on the body and how that comes into play. Like, one of the things that helps me is when I notice when I'm reacting, I feel it in my body
Yeah,
first.
me too.
And that's even before the mind. So becoming in tune with my body has become really helpful.
Yeah, it's
So-
actually not before your mind, but our minds are so fast that the body is a great tool for cluing us in of what's been going on in the mind. Yeah, I do too. I mean, this is the thing. I have this whole spot that as soon as I'm agitated, I mean, the slightest bit of agitation, I can feel it, but that's because I notice. And so that's a really good way, a good avenue into realizing, oh, I'm getting agitated. My button's been pressed, and then you can pause and say, what's going on here? In your own head, just examine. It may be that the tone of voice that someone said something to you is it presses a button about, I don't know, somebody else in the past, or just you feel like, oh, they're judging me, which may also just be a habit from your past, so that you can clue in. Okay, and what is one of the things that's so helpful to realize that once you're agitated is that wisdom usually isn't present. You're either, there's a fear element or anger element or some sort of thing going on that doesn't feel good for you. And when our disturbing, that's why they call them disturbing emotions, when those arise in the mind, our mind's very unpeaceful. Wisdom is not present when we're in those states. So we're not really reliable in the way we respond, which is why so often we're reactive. We just react. So this is where, as soon as you notice in your body, you can pause and do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. I tend to be an anxious person, so I always have to kind of tell myself, don't worry, I'm not going to do anything to make it worse. I have to say those things to myself. Okay, I'm not going to make a decision yet. I obviously don't know what I'm doing at the moment, so I have to chill. I mean, I have all these, it's all a private conversation. You don't have to share it with anybody else. It's just
Like a self-talk.
yes, and it's comforting. We it's okay to comfort ourselves. If our feelings are hurt, it's okay to comfort. Doesn't mean that the other person's actually trying to hurt us. We don't want to think that the fact that we have a reaction means they are doing something to us. It's our habit. We may be misreading the situation. It may be reminding us of some old hurt, be all kinds of things. We need to take care of ourselves. We don't have to blame anybody else for how we're feeling. That doesn't mean that, when we're in danger, that we don't, we need to get away from the other person. That's true. We don't want to be, there's, fear has an element of, okay, survival, but we need to know when we're truly in danger and where we're just like our reputation's in danger or, where our time's in danger, so, I don't, whatever. We need to be able to notice some differences in what our body's telling us, Sometimes the feelings are really good feeling, and we need to be able to, because that excitement can feel an awful lot like nervousness, but we also need to be able to see if we're exaggerating something good. Infatuation can feel great. It's also no always, so we really have to get to know ourselves well, just to kind of go, okay, chill out. You haven't met the partner of your dreams, not in these last 5 seconds, whatever. But it's just this, and respecting ourselves, like recognizing I need some comfort here. Thich Nhat Hanh always said that if there's a crying baby in the room, a conversation's not needed. You need to pick up the baby and comfort is needed. So we don't have to have a conversation with ourselves like, oh, what are you so worried about? Everything's okay, dear. No. You just need a little reassurance. That's what I need. I need reassurance. Okay, I'm not going to make it work. And we don't have to share all the stuff of the world. So it's not like we have to, being vulnerable is a very helpful way to have good relationships and good harmony with others, recognizing that, yes, other people can hurt us, we can hurt them, all that kind of stuff. We can, that's very important. But it doesn't mean every moment of the day we have to share with people something that is meaningful to us that won't mean a thing to them. Especially when we realize, oh, this is old stuff. This is old stuff I'm responding to. But it's so nice to be able to say, okay, and I will, when I get home, I'll reflect on this a little bit, but I don't have to feel in danger here. The person that stirs this up isn't here at the moment. It just seems like they're here. So whatever it is. But yes, thanks for bringing that up, because it really is the way I notice things first. But slowly, the much more aware you are of what's going on in your mind and your body, checking in from time to time throughout the day, just sort of like, oh, am I even aware? Am I holding, if your shoulders have come up to your ears, then maybe you're a little tense, whatever. I hold my neck in funny ways, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I can't turn my neck. It's a big clue. So getting familiar with these things is very helpful. And the more familiar you are, the sooner you catch it. So that you're not enraged, you're just a slight bit impatient, things like that. You can catch it before it gets out of control, where it's more manageable. So figuring those clues out is really important, noticing it. I've also noticed that, like, sometimes when I'm really kind of not comfortable, there'll be parts of me that are like, I'll notice that I haven't moved my leg in, 45 minutes. I'm sitting on a chair or something, you realize, I'm so still. I don't feel safe. Clearly, I don't feel safe,
Yeah.
So it's helpful, because usually there's nothing happening in the present that really justifies that response. There's no need for it. And I can just kind of go, you can relax now. Don't worry. So,
What you reminded me about as you're speaking, especially when you're saying like you're anxious and you feel it in your body or whatever, is that we can kind of talk to or help ourselves.
mhm.
I never really think it's like I have to hear it sometimes from someone else. Like, oh, you'll be okay. Instead of saying to myself, you know what? I'm gonna be okay. I never,
Yeah.
that's what you're reminding me of. Yeah.
And we're the ones who know us the best. So it really is our best resource. And we may have to have a good friend teach us how to do it. I have a friend who's she's a nun too. She's always going, I really wish you wouldn't talk to my friend that way. It's just that, oh yeah, that's right. There I go again with my speech, So it's just, so sometimes it can help to have the voice of a friend in your head, if that's what you've been relying on. But eventually it's really nice to have that confidence in that your own self-assessment is valuable, that it's reliable. Not always right, but it's reliable. Now, friends aren't always right either. So, but yeah, we can definitely do that. And there's good reason to do that. We are valuable. Taking care of our hearts and minds is an important thing to do, for the people we love, for the world in general. So, responding to those, the moments of need is really good for the world. So it's not selfish, it's a way of self-care.
Yeah.
And then we're more available to care for others. It's hard to give when you have nothing left. And you might not have anything left because you're not doing anything to restore yourself, to trust yourself. So, and there are times in our lives where we don't have a lot of time, where somebody else's need is much greater than our own, there's some health issue or some whatever, so we're just meeting their needs, but that's when that self-talk about being able to acknowledge when it's difficult, or when, to yourself, you just say, this is hard, but I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad I can help. But it's hard. Oh, so, you know. Mm. And not expect ourselves to be happy about being needed all the time. It's okay to kind of, to be tired. It's okay. We still have to rise to the occasion for if we're it, you know. But it's okay to also kind of like my dad had Alzheimer's in the mornings before I go upstairs, I'd have to go, okay, I know you just don't want to do it. And oh my God, do I have to face this day? But of course I wanted to do it, but it was just one of those signs like, oh, it still exists, it still have kind of that. But by allowing myself to acknowledge that I didn't find this fun, this was not fun, and it was hard, allowed me just a little bit of space. So when I went upstairs, I could, be a much more graceful daughter. So, so, you know, but life's hard, you know. And of course, most of us want to be the person that can show up. We don't want to be the person that just can't do it. I mean, I'm not talking about other obligations in your life, but you just mentally just can't do it. We want to be able to show up, but we have to take care of our minds to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so we all have issues.
Yeah.
Stuff in our life. We need to learn how to deal with that through the day, go around.
Yeah. To nourish ourselves so we're able to continue doing what we
Yes.
need to do. Yeah. And then, when we're like, there's a part of us that actually really finds happiness in helping others.
Yes.
So taking care of ourselves so that we can feel that again. So we can feel like, oh, I'm so glad I'm here to be able to help in this way, because there's so many people don't have any help, and it's a tragedy. And so it's wonderful that we're able to be with our loved ones or, for that purpose. So it's just, so we need to remember that and remember how we really are glad that we're able to help, So, but it doesn't make it easy. It's not easy. So, but we value it. This is why reflecting on what we value, how we want to be, helps us, be able to, respond the way we want to respond and not the way our habit energy or that, like when you're tired and but the more we can tell, oh, I'm tired. Okay, that's okay that you're tired, but you really don't want to tell everybody else who you're helping how tired you are. So, because that would be unkind, and they can't do anything about it, So, but having choice is a really nice thing. Giving yourself that choice, taking the time to pause and just say, okay, how do I want to respond? You just catch yourself, that moment before from acting in a way that you always regret later. So I think it's important to read things that inspire you, that make things feel lighter, as well as reading things that might help you transform things, the work stuff. But, it's always good to, reading inspiring words. We recently was out with a group and we were, and they read the Carl Sagan's, that, I forgot what it's called, that tiny blue spot or something. It has, it's one of his lines, but he was talking about how tiny we are in the universe, And that if you went for billions of miles, you wouldn't find another sentient being, living thing, you know? So that person that's really annoying you right now, you know, maybe they've got some value. That it's just, you know, that you know, we are really, there's just this pale blue dot. So it can, you know, when you see things or hear, you know, so it's good to read to or listen to inspiring stuff, you know, a little bit every day to just, you know, go, oh yeah, that's right, I want to be like that. So, but so setting intentions, reflecting on what you'd want an intention to be, spending a little time on that kind of thing, you know, in your mind. Then setting intentions and then trying to remember that intention. And then rejoicing when you do. You know,
Or
all
no.
those things.
Right?
Well, right, you know, so like, but I set the intention.
That was the one thing that I thought was so kind of amusing, like when you realize that you're thinking a negative thought, and then you're supposed to rejoice because you're recognizing it. And I thought that was, you know.
I know it sounds weird at
Yeah,
first,
yeah.
but if you don't notice it, you can't change it.
Yeah,
If you don't acknowledge you're doing it, you can't do anything about it. You know, by noticing that you're doing it and going, I don't really like it, you know, then you have all the choice in the world, you know, but it's just like, until you notice it, you have nothing. You can't do anything. You know, and this idea when we respond to things with guilt, you know, with that idea that I am this way, you're telling yourself you can't change, and that's not true. You know, where none of us are stuck. You know, we change all the time. We're not any one way or the other. You know, we can go in a negative direction and get worse. We probably don't want to do that. So, but we change all the time. None of us are stuck. Our mind is very changeable. And our actions actually come from our mind. So slowly.
Think about how, like, you hear people say, oh, she's whatever age, she'll never change.
Right.
You know, that's,
And what we forget is then when we're in the presence of that person, our expectations determine a lot of how we see what goes on. You know, what we hear, what we think, because we're expecting it to go a certain way, you know, and we interpret whatever they say in the way that we, you know, we just kind of like we've made them stuck. They aren't necessarily stuck, but our attitude towards them, you know, can keep that tension there. Now, it's true that it's, you know, the main thing we need to remember is not so much, oh, she's 85 years old, she'll never change, you know, is that, but maybe we could change our attitude, you know, and have not have the same expectations we've always had. Why do we expect them to change in the first place? You know, what is that about? That's all about us. Oh, I'd like them to be this way. You know, and that's still not that way. You know, we can't control other people at all. You know, so if we want them in our lives, we need to be able to tolerate the way they are. Leave if they get abusive. So I had a good friend whose mother was an alcoholic, and she just told her mother, says, now that I have children, you know, you know, if I come, you can't come to my house, you know, to visit, but I'll bring the kids to you. And if you've been drinking, I'm leaving. It's just that simple. You cannot drink around my children. And she just followed through on that. And she still had a good relationship with her mother when her mother finally died, you know. And her children got to know her, but she kept firm on the fact that, you know, if her mother was drinking, That's it. They'd leave. Or if she showed up and she could tell that she'd been drinking, she left. She didn't bring the kids in at all. So we have choices about how we interact. And some of them are very hard choices. But it's our choices. So, she could have also made the choice, because if her mother had never not drunk, they should never bring the kids there. Well, not that it can be a tough choice, but it be a pretty good one. So. And by doing that, she didn't hate her mother around her children because she just didn't allow her children to be around her. So it opened up an avenue for still having a relationship that, a lot of people miss that opportunity. So it's very interesting. I was always impressed by that decision, by how she handled that decision.
It's actually amazing because a lot of other people would say either or, you change,
That's right.
or,
Yeah.
my children are not going to see you.
Yeah.
And to find that in between way,
Yeah.
which is good for the children and good for the mother and good for herself, that's
Yeah.
a lot of us have to make these kind of decisions, and it's very difficult
Yeah.
to find the right.
And it is difficult. And we can't judge others for their decisions because we don't know what's really going on, so but the more we don't have expectations or assumptions or predictions about the future, the more when a possibility opens up, we'll be able to see it. Because we close doors by having expectations and by setting other people in stone, saying, blah, blah, blah. We won't see change. So, and sometimes it's totally appropriate to, have just leave people out of our lives, so it's just, but, we need to know it's a choice we can make that others won't necessarily cooperate with. We want it, Okay. So at the end of things, it's good to kind of reflect and think, okay, I set an intention at the beginning. What was it anyway? And, and did I follow through? Did I try to follow through? Pat ourselves on the back for showing up, thinking about things from a different angle, perhaps. Any moment that we spend working on our minds has great value, and we can rejoice that we have the free time to do it. There are a lot of people who don't, they never get the opportunity. So we have really pretty good conditions. Not perfect. Just a little bit. Okay.
You mentioned something about expectations, and I think for me personally, that's where I find myself always just losing my way.
Yeah.
When out of feeling a lot, or the extent of friendship or the extent of relationship, you expect more of that person. And when something happens, if it was anybody else, I find myself, having room to forgive and forget, but I don't have that same flexibility for the ones that I love most.
And who loses the most with that?
I think I have lost a lot because
Yeah.
a lot of times I just walk away and prefer to,
Yeah.
you know.
That's the problem with expectations. first of all, we haven't signed a contract with anybody else to say, you know, you need to meet my expectations. And nobody would sign it. You know, because we don't agree on what should be. Well, that's the thing. And we miss out. We just need to know, like, I used to, every time I would go visit my family, I want to finally have that good family experience. And it didn't happen. And it didn't happen again. And finally, when I was fairly old, you know, and I finally went, I still want them in my life. Maybe I could show up for them instead of expecting them to be the good father, the good mother, the good siblings. Maybe I could just show up because I want them in my life. Changed everything. It changed everything.
So you're letting go of the expectation.
Yes, and also just of anything. I just would show up, and instead of prejudging every moment, you know, instead of hoping for, you know, oh, finally my dad will act like, you know, what I think a dad should act like, you know, I was just open to how he acted. And guess what? I like some of the way he acted. He wasn't a great dad. He would have told you that, you know, but we were adults now. He didn't need to be a great dad anymore. You know, really wasn't his job anymore. And once I let go of needing him to be the dad I wanted, which was not going to happen, my mother couldn't be the mother I wanted because she was dead. So I already knew what that kind of loss was like. I didn't want to have that, you know, I didn't want to lose my dad in my life. So I just decided, okay, well, if I really want him in my life, maybe I should show up for him and not just expect him to keep, you know, failing. Oh, and I'm so glad I did. Now, it doesn't always work out, even when you do that. I mean, it depends on what the situation is. But when you don't have an expectation, there's no disappointment.
That's so true. Kind of difficult.
It's definitely difficult. But it's more of just being able to think, okay, what can happen if I do not have a set agenda of what's going to happen? You know, that's what's so nice, is to be able to like, I remember so well one conversation I had with him. It was just the two of us in a room, and, you know, and I realized he's nervous. He's just nervous about how to talk to me, you know, and it was just sort of like, I'm always a nervous person. I was just so like shocked. And then I wanted to help him not be nervous, you know, and it was just different. You know, I saw him as a human being, not as this person who was supposed to be a certain way, you know. It's really amazing what possibilities come up if we can let go of how we want others to be. Now, that doesn't mean we don't, you know, we shouldn't be discerning in who we pick for partners and all that kind of stuff. It just means that, you know, some people we're stuck with, whether, you know, you don't get to just trade in your dad. You know, you don't have to ever see him again, but you don't get, you know, you don't get a second choice, you know. So, you know, you just have to, you know, take them as they come. You can walk away if they're abusive. You can walk away if they're this and that. But if they're not that, if they're just not who you wanted them to be, you know, then, you know, maybe they'll be something else instead.
Is it also because, especially with friends, is it also because we want to hold them up to the same level that we think we are, you know, acting toward them?
Yeah, for sure. We have all sorts of rules, don't we?
They have all sorts of rules.
We have rules,
Yes.
you know, and they're going to be different than their rules. You know, so we're just shortchanging ourselves of whatever is possible if we don't have that expectation. You know, that opens up the door to all sorts of things being able, because you'll discover things about them you never thought would be nice to have in a friend. You know, and people are not perfect, and neither are you. So it just allows so much more freedom, period, to not have to expect yourself to be perfect with your friends and not to expect them to be perfect towards you.
Wow.
You know, there's just more opportunities there. And that gives you also the time to develop a closeness that can't be there if you always have these rules that cut them off too soon. You know,
Well, that's amazing. Yeah.
so it's just about possibility. That's what's freeing about, recognizing the person we have control over is ourselves, nobody else. We can choose who we allow in our lives, but we can't make them act like we want them to act. And we should choose. We should make choices with wisdom. So it's just, but having that the open arms, like, okay, we're friends until, who knows? Oh. So, and it's nice having really old friends.
Very nice.
Yeah. So, and I'm so grateful people didn't give up on me, that I have some old friends, because I was a jerk. I was really fortunate that I was still allowed in people's lives a lot longer. So now we want to rejoice.
Yes.
And we want to be generous with whatever positive causes we've created for positive things in the future. Those are what the merits are. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may we quickly attain the state of Guru Buddhas and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Just as the brave Manjushri and Samantabhadra too realize things as they are, I too dedicate all these merits in the best way, that I may follow their perfect example. Sorry, I'm just gonna have to scroll to find it. One of these days, I'll remember where this is. I bookmarked it because of all the merits of the 3 times created by me and all the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and other sentient beings. May there be no wars, famines, disease, quarreling, fighting, or unhappy minds. May there be great prosperity, and may everything needed be easily obtained. May all the human beings in the world be guided by spiritual leaders teaching only Dharma, and may everyone enjoy the happiness of Dharma. May everyone have perfect conditions and have only compassion and love for each other in their mind streams, and may they only benefit and never harm each other. Long life prayer for His Holiness. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Chenrezig, Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. And then for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losam father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now, holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice. You wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from other living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the 3 jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. Well, thank you very much. It's been a
Thank you
delight.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Venerable
Bob.
Tendron.
All right, I think we have one
You
more
too.
of these classes next Tuesday, and we have a class Thursday and the following Thursday, but then I think
Okay.
Venerable Amy comes, and Sunday. I'll also be here Sunday.
And then what
Right.
happens after that?
Venerable Amy will be in town teaching. She's another teacher, and so
You'll be back.
I'll be back in January, February, and March. So there we go.
Just an intermission.
This is a brief intermission. Yeah, okay.
Please stay tuned.
Everybody have a safe week.
So one more class, yes?
One more Tuesday night class
Thank you.
and one more, yep, I think, yeah,
Is there one this
two more Thursday night class.
Thursday?
Yeah,
Even better. Thank you.
And then 2
Okay.
Sundays,
I did. And one Sunday,
Sunday.
I don't know. I live.
Bye.
Someone turn off the recording.
Yeah, I'm working there. I'm
Okay.
working on it.
Okay.
Hold.
Mm.
I see. Well, it's too late. It's okay. No, you're
Hey, yes.
doing everything right. I just wanted to.
Oh,
Yes.
So,
Oh,
yeah,
too late.
But you left, okay.
Are you sure you want something?
yes.
Yeah. First, oh, I did.